Yo, what's up, Chef Squad? Welcome back to a brand new video here today on the channel. We are going to be looking at some of the rogue decks that have been performing well in our past two late night tournaments. Two different really cool archetypes actually ended up getting top 8 at our last two late nights, of course, the late night 72 and the late night 71. First of all, we got the Zation V-Star deck here. That got top 8 at one of our late nights. This build was, of course, piloted by Regice19. Really interesting to see Zation V-Star perform so well. I know a lot of people really kind of just wrote it off as not the greatest deck ever or the greatest card ever, but of course Rendy was able to get top 8 with the Zation V-Star deck. We're of course going to break down his deck and look at some of the matchups he played within the tournament to see how his run went. And then one of my favorite decks to actually see do well was actually piloted by Sir Remore here, who actually got second place in the late night number 72, actually piloting this really cool Arceus deck using Arceus V-Star with a Alolan Vulpix V-Star. Now, actually, fun fact, I've looked at this deck before. I actually considered playing an Arceus Pikachu Vulpix deck to Orlando, and I'll talk about why Vulpix is so special in a minute, because it's actually a really, really strong card against some pretty interesting archetypes out in the format, and it's really cool to see this deck actually ended up getting second place in the tournament. But we're going to start things off here looking at the Zation deck. So this is the Zation V-Star list. As you can see, it does have a turbo engine built in. It is utilizing the Mew from Celebrations, actually only playing 3 Mew in the deck. However, the deck doesn't play that many basics. It has the Mew, the Zamazenta, the 3 Zation, and the Crobat and Greninja, so the odds of starting Mew aren't super low without even needing to play 4. The nice thing about playing 3 is you get away with playing extra cards in the deck. As you can see, this list is loaded with different item cards. First of all, we have the Metal Saucer, we have 4 Cross Switcher in the deck, we have 2 Shoes, 2 VIP, 2 Ultra Ball, 2 E-Search, 1 Rope, 1 Heavy Ball, 1 Switch, 2 Belt, 3 Nets, just a ton of items that you can abuse with the Mew. Now, this list is, of course, prioritizing the Zation V-Star. Zation V-Star does have an attack that does 200 damage for 3 energy and shreds through the opponent. This can be really relevant if you're, of course, playing against Goodra, which is very popular. You can shred Goodra. Goodra, of course, does do 200 damage back to you, but due to Zation being able to just constantly shred them, you actually kind of just go through Goodra's rolling iron effect by doing 200 to it. Since this deck is extremely fast with the Metal Saucers and the Zation V, it's actually very possible to get a turn 1 Zation V attack. You can play really aggressive into matchups like Goodra, and even if they are able to get rolling iron off, you do have the ability to attack with the Zation V-Star. Zation V-Star, of course, does come equipped with a very strong V-Star power, being able to do 310 damage for the 4 energy. Of course, you can load that up with Metal Saucer. You load up Zation V-Star, do 310 damage. This will knock out most Pokemon in the format, most V-Stars. Of course, you'll be short on V-Maxes, but we do have 2 Belt in the deck, which at the very least will also let us go through a Duraludon V-Max, which is really, really cool. The 1/1 Zamazenta is really cool too. Zamazenta V has the ability Regal Stance, you can discard your hand, draw 5 cards, your turn will end, and then you have the V-Star, which also does 230 damage, but you can't attack the next turn. However, you do get Zamazenta V-Star's V-Star power, which can be very helpful, allowing you to have all your Pokemon take 100 less damage from Pokemon Vs during your opponent's next turn, and this can come in handy in a lot of different scenarios, and definitely is a really cool partner to partner up with Zation V. Again, the thing I like about this deck is how aggressive you can be with Zation. Again, a lot of the time you can actually get a turn 1 Zation to attack your opponent with Radiant Greninja discarding Metal Energy, using Metal Saucer, using Ultra Ball, Quick Ball to discard energy. Their deck does play 1 Research, 1 Marnie, 1 Birdkeeper as our one of supporters, and there is also 2 copies of Raihan in the deck. The Raihan is very, very important to be able to allow you to accelerate extra energy. With only 4 Metal Saucer and Intrepid Sword, sometimes you do need that extra little bit of push of energy attachment, and that's where the Raihan comes in clutch. The Birdkeeper is really cool. Again, most of the attackers do require you to wait a turn to attack again, like Zamazenta or Zation V. And then having the Serenas in the deck can help you gust. Actually, not opting to play any boss's orders, just trying to go all in on the turbo, which I quite like. Now, let's take a look at Rendy's matchups here. So, round 1, he played against a Lugia deck. Definitely is an interesting matchup for this deck. I feel like Lugia can definitely beat you if they're able to kind of set up their Archeops. But I guess what maybe happened is Rendy was just able to get a turn 1 Zation KO on one of the Lugia Vs. Same thing could have happened here in round number 2 against Alex Hamilton. As you can see, the same thing maybe could have happened where he was just able to knock out a Lugia V-Star before it evolved. The interesting win is actually against Reggie. Now, theoretically, Regice is a bad matchup. Your prize trade is not great. You are a 2-prize deck. They are a 1-prize deck. However, the caveat with that is that Zation actually doesn't get one-shot by any of the Regis. And even if they try to use Regice against you, you do play 4 Cross-Switcher, 1 Rope, and 1 Switch, and a Bird Keeper. So you're able to kind of constantly pivot around your Zations and not have your Zation get KO'd. I guess if you're very cautious with what you bench, like if you don't bench Crobat, if you don't put too many Mews in place so that your opponent can just knock them out with Regilecky, the Regi matchup should be beatable, especially if you're able to get maybe a couple extra early prizes on a Regigigas before, they even attack you. The matchup should be very favored because, again, they have to 2-shot you, and you can easily 1-shot them. Interestingly enough, the Zation deck did lose to Eternus VMAX, sorry, which is definitely an interesting loss to take since Eternus VMAX kind of is a bit of a, not a slower deck, but a deck that I feel like you can probably beat with Zation. I think what really happens here is Galarian Weezing puts in a lot of work. Of course, Weezing can be very annoying to deal with, so I'm sure Weezing did a lot of the work for the opponent. Obviously, Weezing shuts off Mew and Zation V's ability, so he probably just drew poorly, and Weezing just kind of bodied him, and then, the opponent just got up a big Eternus VMAX, which Zation V-Star can one-shot an Eternus VMAX with the Choice Belt and its V-Star power, but I think what happened was we just saw a lot of Weezing shenanigans kind of put in a lot of work, and then in round number 5, he actually played against another Lugia deck. So currently, he was able to beat yet another Lugia deck in Swiss here and actually beating it. Once again, I have to feel like the way the matchup played out is Zation V maybe took out the only Lugia in play or just was able to just kind of run him over with the Zation. I imagine that's how the matchup plays out. I feel like the Lugia matchup is sketchy, especially when, the Zation deck doesn't play Manaphy, so Raikou can be good. Yveltal's also kind of a threat. Charizard's in most Lugia decks, which is a big issue for Zation, as Zation is already weak to fire, so I'm actually interested to see that the Zation deck was able to beat the 3rd Lugia deck in a row. Zation also took down Mew. I actually think Mew is beatable. The Zation deck, as you see, doesn't play a single Drapion. Actually, I think what happens is, what you can do in the Mew matchup is, Brave Blade, you can either knock out, an early Mew, and then you can V-Star a Mew VMAX. Even with an Oricorio in play, you can play a Choice Belt to one-shot this Mew VMAX, and then, of course, you can try to Brave Blade one last Mew. I wonder if Zamazenta V-Star is actually good here, too. Obviously, Mew can use Max Miracle, so I'm not too sure on that one, but it is cool that Zation ended up beating that. Maybe what happened, too, is the Mew didn't have a great start, and maybe the Zation V got a turn 1 knockout, and that forced Fernando in a pretty tough spot. Now, he did also beat an Arceus Tapu Koko deck. This matchup is interesting. I think the Arceus Koko deck does, of course, play the Flying Pikachu VMAX in the deck, which can be an issue. However, with Zation V-Star, it's not too bad. I think what happened here is maybe we saw the Koko VMAX get one-shot at one point by Zation V-Star's V-Star power. I think another thing about that matchup is the paralysis doesn't really do too much when you are playing a Bird Keeper, 4 Cross Switch, or a Rope and a Switch in your deck. So while Tapu Koko VMAX tries to paralyze you and slow you down, having access to all these different switching cards certainly does come in clutch for the Zation V-Star deck, and I'm sure that's what we kind of saw be a huge factor in how Rendy won that game, was Koko VMAX's paralysis was unable to really do anything against Zation as it just has so many switching cards. The Koko Arceus deck also doesn't have that much damage output. I mean, you're doing 180. Most you can do is probably like 200 damage with Arceus with 3 basic energy on it, and Koko's only doing 180, and then Flying Pikachu's only doing 160, and Flying Pikachu used to be good against Zation, but now that there's the V-Star, the Flying Pikachu is not very good against the Zation. And I feel like it's just another case of just out-tempoing it. Maybe going first against Arceus is really good. If they whip the turn 1 double turbo, you get a Brave Blade on their only Arceus V in play. That can be pretty devastating. Actually, opting to tie against the Lugia deck, most likely just IDing into top 8. And then, unfortunately, it looks like Rendy did lose to Lugia in top 8. It's interesting that he was able to beat 3 other Lugia decks in top 8. What maybe could happen is those Lugia decks had bad beats. Actually, interestingly, in round 2, he played against Alex Hamilton with the Lugia deck and beat him, and then in top cut, he actually ended up losing to Alex. So maybe what could have happened is, of course, Lugia sometimes going first can be very deadly for Zation. Maybe, he wasn't able to get that, capitalize on that early Zation KO on a Lugia, and I'm sure Lugia just kind of beats Zation, so it's interesting that he was able to beat all these Zations. I wonder how the Zation deck was able to beat all the Lugia decks in the Swiss, because I do feel like Lugia would be a tougher matchup for the Zation V-Star deck. But really cool to see Zation V-Star do really well. Obviously, I think it is a really cool deck, being super fast, having a decent matchup into stuff like Duraludon and Goodra is pretty good, and you kind of take like 50-50s against like Mew, and I guess even like Lugia could be a 50-50. I'm very curious to see how he was able to beat those Lugia decks. I am honestly very, very curious about how all that went down. But of course, the next story is going to be the Arceus Flying Pikachu Vulpix deck. Now, fun fact, I actually was going to play an Arceus Flying Pikachu Vulpix deck to Orlando. Now, the big thing with Vulpix is Vulpix can shred through Goodra. Now, not only can it shred through Goodra, Vulpix's attack does 160 damage, shreds the opponent for 160, but also makes it so that Vulpix cannot be damaged by Pokemon with abilities, meaning that Goodra V-Star will not be able to attack you, as Goodra V-Star does have an ability, which is huge. Since Goodra does have an ability, you are able to they can't touch you since their ability is obviously in play. And Goodra doesn't play Path of the Peak, they play Temple of Sinnoh. Yes, the Vulpix deck plays Path. However, against Goodra, you're not putting Path of the Peak in play because it will activate Goodra being able to Rolling Iron your Vulpix. So you do not play the Path of the Peak in that matchup, and they can't do anything against your Vulpix. However, there's one thing they can do, and that is they can play the Baby Goodra. The Goodra V can still attack Vulpix. That is actually the thing that turned me off of playing the Vulpix Pikachu deck to Orlando, was that upon further realization, the Vulpix does good against Goodra, but a good Goodra player can just use the Baby Goodra, which does 140, which two-shots you. However, the cool thing about this list is actually the V-Guard energy. So if you put a V-Guard energy on your Vulpix V-Star, the Baby Goodra can only do 110 damage, which does not two-shot your Vulpix, meaning that your Vulpix, at the very least, should out-tempo even the Baby Goodras, which is really, really cool. And also, in theory, if the Goodra deck misses a beat, draws poorly, of course, having access to 4 Marnie in the deck means that the Goodra deck can fumble a couple turns, and you can get early attacks in with the Vulpix, take a couple extra prizes, put on a lot of early aggressive tempo. The Radiant Gardevoir is really good, too, for the Goodra matchup. You can also play Gardevoir so that the Goodra only does 100 and, well, actually it would still do 120, so it would still two-shot you. But again, the V-Guard Gardevoir goes really hard in that matchup. And of course, you got the Flying Pikachu Double Parasol package, which is, of course, insanely good against Lost Box. Now, in my build of Arceus Vulpix Pikachu, I wasn't playing the Gardevoir or the Collapse. I actually played 3-Path, but I also opted to play a 1-1 Aerodactyl. I'm honestly not sure Arceus has a good matchup against Lugia. I don't think Arceus can beat Lugia, so in my Vulpix Pikachu Arceus deck, I actually played a 1-1 Aerodactyl in the deck to try to help against Lugia. So if you go second against Lugia, or go first against Lugia, you can, at least try to Aerodactyl them out of the game, which was the whole idea of playing the Aerodactyl. So my build played Aerodactyl. Actually, I might even just pop up a picture on screen here of my list to show you, kind of compare the lists. But it's a really cool deck. The cool thing about Vulpix is actually you take a decent matchup into Mew. So what happens against the Mew matchup is you don't use Starbirth. What you do is use Vulpix's V-Star power, Silvery Snow Star, which for no energy does 70 damage, times the amount of Pokemon V your opponent has in play. So if your opponent, obviously Mew is going to bench a lot of Genesects, a lot of Mews, at the very least, Vulpix will always one-shot a Mew VMAX with that V-Star power, and then you can knock out another Mew VMAX with Drapion to win the game, which is really cool. So that's kind of how you can beat Mew. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to play the deck, because I felt like it had good matchups. Again, the Lost Box matchup is good with Pikachu and Parasol. The Vulpix is good into Goodra, and Vulpix Drapion gives you a really nice time against Mew. But I ended up not playing the deck because I didn't know if Arceus was really all that good into Orlando. But of course, getting second in the late night, number 72, is no sitting joke, and actually played through a lot of games. We're going to break down some of the matches here. Round 1 is against Regice. Should be a pretty free matchup. Again, Pikachu, big Parasol puts in work. I don't even know if the Regi deck played the Lost Vacuum, so if they didn't have the Vacuum, the Flying Pikachu should just kind of body the opponent. Once again, round 2, beating the Rayquaza Lost Box deck. Once again, this is a matchup where the Flying Pikachu Parasol just puts in a lot of work. Though I will say Ray is kind of close. When they have access to Escape Rope and Boss, they can still one-shot a Pikachu. Amazing Raikou is actually really annoying too, because you don't play Manaphy, so Raikou also puts in a lot of work for the Lost Box deck. And then it also beat a Kyurem Palkia deck. This matchup, I think, is actually free. Literally, all you do is just attack with a Alolan Vulpix V-Star, and their attacks are going to do nothing. They can attack with Baby Palkia V or Kyurem V, but that's just not very efficient. Again, I think the V-Guard and Gardevoir really does put in a lot of work against that matchup, so Kyurem Palkia seems to be a pretty good matchup for the Vulpix. Now, one matchup I am sketched out about is actually Arcdura. It actually ended up beating Arcduraludon. I feel like you have to go first against Arcdura. Your attacks are also very weak. Vulpix does shred through Duraludon, but Duraludon also shreds through your own Vulpix. So while you do stop the Duraludon technically from attacking you, Duraludon can just do its own attack and shred through your own Vulpix's own attack, which is kind of funny. So I feel like the Duraludon matchup is not very good. So it's actually cool that he ended up beating the Duraludon matchup, because Duraludon shreds through Gardevoir and shreds through the V-Guard energy. So if Duraludon's playing Choice Belt, which some lists are because it helps against control, you just kind of lose your Vulpix. So that's another reason why I like having the Aerodactyl in the deck, by the way. When I put the Aerodactyl in, I also realized Aerodactyl is really good against Arcdura because it gives you a really strong attacker against that Duraludon. Then it also just beat an Arceus deck. I actually don't even know what this was. I assume it's... I guess we can take a quick look at it here. Okay, so it was an Arceus Pikachu Aerodactyl Toolbox deck. Okay, yeah, this matchup is probably pretty good. I think that Vulpix V-Star probably puts in a lot of work. The Flying Pikachu can be countered by the own Flying Pikachu. Yeah, I feel like the Vulpix deck should be favored as long as it's able to out-tempo, because the best attacker they have is Aerodactyl, but once you get through the Aerodactyl, Arceus can't attack you. Flying Pikachu gets killed by the own Flying Pikachu. So, yeah, it seems pretty favored for the Vulpix deck. And it ended up losing to a Lugia deck, which, yeah, Lugia's tough. I mean, if they have Dunsparce too, right, the Flying Pikachu is pretty bad. But it ended up beating another Lugia deck here in round 7, which is kind of cool to see. I think a lot of the work can be put in, honestly, through the Path to Peak. The thing is that Vulpix V-Star could be good against Lugia. The problem is they can still attack you with Baby Lugia and Stoutland V, which is actually really tough to deal with, though. Vulpix isn't even that good against Lugia because, again, Lugia can attack with Lugia V or Stoutland V against you, and that can be very tough to deal with. He actually ended up beating Cal Connor in round 8, sorry. And Cal was on control. I think it was the Sander control deck here, right? Yeah, it was the Ice Cube control deck. I think that's a pretty fair matchup. Vulpix V-Star literally just shreds through everything. Vulpix V-Star is just insane. I don't think Cal really stood a chance. Again, Vulpix can shred through Miltank. There's really no shenanigans. There's no hammers, no Yellhorn. So, yeah, Vulpix just kind of is just insane in that matchup. That's just probably an auto loss for Cal. And then he actually lost to a Goodra deck, that's the weird thing. You would think that Vulpix was built for Goodra, but I guess Goodra can still play Temple of Sinnoh and shut off your V-Guard energy. So that's interesting that he lost to a Goodra deck in round 9. I feel like that had to have been a very, very close set there. And then, of course, in making phase 2, he ended up beating another Lugia deck and then ended up losing to another Lugia deck, actually losing to the same person he beat in round number 7. I'm sure these were just like, it wasn't like Lugia Pikachu, right? It was like straight Lugia. Yeah, straight Lugia. With that Snorlax, which I guess Snorlax can't do much. But again, I think Lugia probably beats the Vulpix. Again, they can attack with Stoutland or the Baby Lugia, which still puts on enough pressure. And up beating yet another Lugia deck here, which once again was just another like straightforward Lugia deck. Then, of course, beat the Palkia deck. Now, that's an interesting matchup. I guess it's actually pretty favored since Palkia does have a lot of abilities. Of course, Palkia V-Star can't attack you. Inteleon can't attack you. Articuno, I guess, is good, but because of the Paracells, like, I'm pretty sure, the Articuno isn't very good. Because Articuno should technically do work, but this list has no vacuum, so Paracell, Vulpix kind of goes right in. I think the big issue, I guess, would be the Crabominable being able to attack the Vulpix, which I guess is a problem, but I feel like you can also just use Flying Pikachu in this matchup, too. Yeah, I guess Flying Pikachu Paracell does work. I kind of forgot about that. Palkia is weak to lightning. Yeah, never mind. Okay. Flying Pikachu put in a lot of work, too. Yeah, that Palkia matchup seems really good for the deck. I guess Crabominable is kind of sketchy, but even then, you just have 2 Pikachus. You probably can't lose. And actually, ended up getting the revenge and beating the Goodra deck here, making it into top 8. So that's really cool that he was able to beat the Goodra deck once again, the same person that he played against in round 9 of Swiss. But yeah, I think the Goodra matchup should be beatable. You can use the Vulpix. If they try to attack with Baby Goodra, that's fine. You have some tank in there. Maybe one thing you could experiment with in the deck is actually maybe trying out Hyper Potion to heal your Vulpix. This could be an idea, but it is cool to see that he was able to take down a Goodra deck in the round 14, getting into top 8, and actually he ended up getting 2nd place in the overall tournament. In top 8, he beat another Goodra deck. Let me just check the list here. Nothing crazy. I think it's like just the straight consistency list. Yeah, just straightforward. Goodra. Oh, but this Goodra list played Path. Now, that could be a problem. I guess the Path to Peak could cause some issues because the Path will shut off Goodra's ability, meaning that it can attack the Vulpix. I think Vulpix maybe just shredded and did a lot of work. The double Drapion probably wasn't very good either. I'm sure the double Drapion actually ended up costing the game there for the Goodra player. But yeah, I guess, like, it could go either way. Maybe you just get some early, like, the Goodra deck bricks a little bit off of, like, a Marnie, and Vulpix probably puts in a lot of work. Only the 2 Goodra Vs, I guess, is also pretty good for the Vulpix deck, so it's interesting. And then beating Goodra playing, and then against Mew Genesect. And again, I do feel like Mew Genesect is a good matchup. And actually, this Mew Genesect deck didn't play Path, which I think is honestly what probably lost the game there, is that it didn't play Path. It just actually had 1 Marnie, no Roxanne, no Judge, just a singular copy of Marnie. I think the reason why the Vulpix deck won, again, in this matchup, you can go Vulpix V-Star and Drapion to knock out 2 Mew VMAXs back-to-back. And I think that's probably what happened. And even, like, Path can put in work, too. Like, Arceus Path Marnie is probably really good against Mew also. Especially as this build only has the 1 vacuum, and there's like not that many outs to the stadium, which is probably another reason why we saw the Vulpix Arceus deck beat the Mew deck, and ended up losing to Isaiah Bradner in the finals with that Lugia deck. I think Isaiah was streaming at the time. So I guess if you go back to Isaiah's Twitch, you can probably watch the game back. Again, Lugia seems decently favored into that matchup. If Lugia goes first, it's really bad. I mean, I guess if they go second, you can maybe win, but if Lugia goes first, I feel like it's not very good. And again, thanks to the variety of attackers you have, the Vulpix can be easily attacked with Stoutland, Raikou, Yveltal if you can't find Parasol. Of course, Isaiah playing the double Lost Vacuum definitely goes a long way too, as you're able to vacuum off those Parasols for the Yveltal. And yeah, it just doesn't seem like a good time in that matchup. I do think that the Vulpix deck can beat Lugia, but it is tough, and Isaiah Bradner was, of course, able to take down the Vulpix deck and end up winning the late night. But honestly, a really good run and a really unique deck, and I'm really happy to see this Vulpix V-Star deck do really well in the tournament, because as you saw, a lot of the matchups are pretty good. Again, I think you can beat Goodra, you can beat Regice, you can beat Lost Box, and of course, I think your Mew matchup is decent too. I think the only thing this Vulpix Arceus Pikachu deck really needs to figure out is that Lugia matchup, and maybe that's where you could start experimenting with stuff like Aerodactyl V-Star in the deck to help you there. But overall, the deck is really cool, and I'm really happy to see this deck do well, as I was also on this concept going into Orlando, but ended up scrapping it for Regice. But I did like the idea, and I'm glad to see it actually doing well in the late night. Getting second place is just awesome to see, so I'm really happy about that, and this is a really cool deck, and I'm glad that people are experimenting with different anti-meta decks right now. So we'll have to see where this happens with this deck, if this deck ends up performing well in any other tournaments or anything, because I do think there is potentially a future for a deck like this in the meta. But yeah, hope y'all enjoyed today's video here on the Shuffle Squad, looking at 2 rogue decks and breaking down their tournament runs. I'm sure we'll see more rogue decks in the next couple late night tournaments going into next week, because I'm excited to see what people bring to the table that is unique and creative, because of course Zation V-Star is something nobody had on their bingo card, and I'm sure this Arceus Vulpix Pikachu deck is something nobody saw coming either. So it's really cool to see these decks do well, and I'm hoping that we can continue to see cool rogue decks perform well in the late night for next week. But that'll be it for me. Hope you enjoyed. If y'all are new to the channel, of course, make sure to subscribe down below. We actually just hit 14,000 subs here on the Shuffle Squad, so I want to thank each and every one of you for helping us achieve 14K. Check out all our sponsors down below too, as always, and I will catch you all on another video next week, and peace out. Bye-bye.
The Shuffle Squad is proudly sponsored by Atlas Collectibles, the best place to buy any trading card game product online. Visit atlastcg.com, and at the checkout screen, make sure to use code TSS12 to save an unbeatable 12% off your entire order. Atlas Collectibles will ship your product anywhere in the world, so make sure you're taking advantage of the 12% savings with TSS12. And if Pokemon is not your thing, don't worry. Go to atlastcg.com and see all the other amazing trading card game products they have there to offer.
The Shuffle Squad is partnered with PTC Geo Store to provide our community with the best access to Pokemon TCG codes. They have codes available 24/7, instant email delivery, and you can save 5% off by using code TSS5. If you're a YouTube member or Patreon supporter, you'll have access to a special code that gets you 10% off. So what are you waiting for? Use code TSS5 today and save 5% on your next order of codes on any codes available at ptcgeostore.com.
Are you trying to be the best like no one ever was? Now is your time. Head on over to metafy.gg and search out all our amazing Pokemon TCG coaches, where you can book all sorts of training plans ranging from deck help to full season sessions with your favorite coach. What a great way to up your game. Check out metafy.gg in the description below and take your game to the next level. Challenge yourself against trainers from around the world to compete for the biggest online prizing yet.
Are you ready for an unbelievable tournament unlike anything else you've ever seen before? The Shuffle Squad is proud to announce our newest tournament series, the Late Night Event, with an amazing grand prize that's bound to have you excited.
Players can compete via play.limitless.tcg.com's online tournament platform every Tuesday to get a chance to earn weekly prizes. And every week, your placement in the tournament is tallied by points based on your best finishes to earn your rank for the Late Night Invitational event.
The series will be conducted starting February 7th of 2023 and carry all the way through to the Invitational on July 9th of 2023, where the top players will be rewarded the grand prizing.
And the grand prize is a signed jersey and photo op with the entire Shuffle Squad, as well as a fully paid trip to the Pokemon World Championships in Yokohama, Japan. This includes hotel and airfare, whether you're a player or a spectator.
Don't forget to check out all the live coverage on our YouTube and Twitch channel of the top cuts of these events for every week. and subscribe so you can get notified where to watch the Late Night Events Invitational brought to you by the Shuffle Squad. Now get out there and start winning. We'll see you in Japan.